All right, hey everybody. We're going to do a little reading tonight. Yes, sirree. Another installment of Falling Asleep to Jim Moynagh, reading from Vintage Fishing Magazines, which every time is a Bassmaster because that's the only vintage magazines I got available. But on the docket for tonight is this issue of Bassmaster Magazine, July, August 1981. And check out what this bass is about to bite. Oh yeah, baby. The old monarch butterfly. Get out those orange topwaters, get out those orange jigs, and have at it. And those monarchs are flying around. Okay, I've already picked out the article, and this is what it is right here. Okay? Midsummer Bass and Tactics by James A. Brang. James A. Brang. Okay, I know it's like dang near winter solstice, but we're going to warm up the evening with some Midsummer Bass and Tactics. Here we go. Hey, summer's dog days. Hey, summer's dog days got you down? Your bassing success in a slump? Well, don't give up. Midsummer Bass and Tactics, here they are. Bass are like people, only wetter. When the sun bears down, look for a fish in the shade. All right, James, here we go. The scorching days of midsummer, a time known as the doldrums of bass fishing, old big mouth lies dormant, inactive in the depths during the day, only invading the cooler shallows to feed at night. Right? That's what he's asking here, right? Wrong, says James A. Brang. Ridiculous. 100 times incorrect. The bass are active at night, all right, and often in or near shallow water, but daytime midsummer bassing can be just as terrific. Allow me to explain, says James A. Brang. All right, check out. Oh, did you get a good look at the picture? You know, you got some fully developed lotus pads, a bass boat, a bass angler, and a Johnson silver minnow in the bass's lip. Okay, after years of chasing bass all over the country, both day and night, oftentimes catching them in shallow 80-degree plus water during the hottest part of the day, I'm positive it's not so much the heat that bothers Mr. Bass as it is the direct rays of the bright sun. And I agree. They do like shade in the summertime, for sure. If you have any doubts, just think about it for a minute. Although the air temperature does change substantially from midday to night during the summer, the water temperature remains almost constant. I have checked it dozens of times, and under normal conditions have never found the water temperature to change more than a degree or two at most. Definitely not enough to influence the bass's activity. In small ponds following severe cold fronts, there is a more distinct change, but oddly enough, these were times when night fishing was the worst. During the hot, dry periods of late June, July, and August, the water is frequently the clearest of the year, the weather the calmest, and the sun almost directly overhead. Okay, time out. In Minnesota, the water is not at its clearest in August and July. June, it might still be clear, but by August is probably our most dingiest water. Even in lakes that are considered, clear, you're going to have some kind of algae bloom that's going to cut down on that clarity a little bit. And heck, if you get into some of our farmland lakes, I mean, that algae bloom is going to limit your visibility to something like this. Even though right after ice out in that same lake, you might have 3-foot visibility. And then late in the fall, when that algae bloom dies off, you get back near that 3-foot of visibility. So I got to disagree with James A. Brang. However, the lakes where he's fishing, it may hold true. It just might. But I just don't see where that's the case. All right, these conditions of The weather the calmest, the sun most directly overhead, and the water the clearest, supposedly. These conditions allow more sunlight to penetrate into deeper open water than at any other season. It is my belief that bass will search for areas containing some type of shield and protection from the sun. Okay, where to look for bass? That's the headline of this next paragraph. Numerous types of structure, cover, weather, and water conditions influence where bass will be in midsummer. Areas containing heavy, thick surface cover are excellent and easy to locate. Old, ramshackle duck blinds, log jams, brush piles, beds of hyacinths, lily pads, or other types of thick, almost solid cover, or vegetation with some space or open water beneath it are prime summer bassin spots. And the closer to deep water these areas are located, the better the odds of finding abundant and larger bass. On the other hand, where certain types of thick moss grow from the surface to the bottom, with no openings, you'll encounter few, if any, bass. All right, I like what he says about the deeper, areas, that the deeper beds of these areas that he's talking about, the duck blinds, the lily pads, and so on. When I'm fishing that shallow, shady cover, yeah, a lot of times you want that deeper water but not always, but a lot of times. And what I like is the more main, I might be shallow, but I want to be main lake. I want main lake water mixing in with the edge of that lily pad bed. I want main lake water mixing in with them heavy bulrushes or the matted algae mats. I want some main lake influence with that stuff. You don't want the stagnant. The water will actually turn brown as you get way inside a heavy lily pad field, for example. The water will be have a green tinge to it, for example, on the outer edge, but then as you move way inside of it and you hit some shallow coontail mats, and then that water way back in there closer to the shoreline just does not mix with the main lake, and that water way back in there, if it doesn't mix, it's not going to hold the bass very good. Times where they can get in there is perhaps if you're in a river situation, the river fluxes, goes up or way down, it goes way up or something, and that fresh water flushes into there. But you got to have that fresh water in there. So anyways, enough of that. Let's get back to James A. Brang and his educational tips here. All right, summer bass are also attracted to vertical structure, such as standing trees, underwater ledges, sunken islands, the edges of tall weed beds, shoreline bluffs, and overhanging trees. The key is one word: shade. Fish frequently move completely around an obstacle or section of cover as the sun moves from east to west during the course of the day. Along creeks or ledges, bass may switch from one bank to another, or move a short distance up or down a creek to find a bend or submerged cover that provides shade. In open bathtub-type lakes with little structure or cover, bass will retreat to the deeper sections. Even clear water filters out some sunlight as the depth increases. And even crystal clear lakes and pits have deep water silt lines where there is a band of cloudy water. Wind and rough surface water help block out some sunlight too. Even when the water is clear, the waves and chop breaks up the surface, which prevents a portion of the sunlight from penetrating to the depths. In summer, windy weather can be a basser's best friend. Many times, fish gather along windswept shorelines, especially where silt is stirred up along a clay or mud shoreline or bottom, to mix in with the surrounding water, which provides a sun shield. So he's talking about your basic mud line in that case there. Let me just rotate this around just a little bit. Okay. All right. Overcast conditions accompanying weather fronts frequently offer some of the best opportunities for summertime bass angling. Yes, sir, Mr. James Brang. Those storms, get them going. I agree. Overcast and storms will get them going. But I have noticed extended overcast, like for example, the storm comes in, heavy overcast, the fish bite like crazy. The next day, it's still lingering overcast. Bite's not near as good. I have seen that more than once. Okay, overcast conditions accompanying weather fronts, blah, 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 blah. The darker and more threatening the weather, the better it is for fishing. Consider staying on the lake when it begins to rain, unless there is lightning, strong winds, or obvious unsafe conditions. In addition to bringing insects and food into the water and a fresh supply of oxygen, heavy raindrops break up the surface even more than a strong wind. Boy, there's some people I cannot get to go fishing in the rain, though. I mean, no matter how good the fish might be biting, they will, even if they have rain gear, they still will not go in the rain, even with no lightning and maybe just a light wind or no wind. Nope, won't go in the rain. They might get wet. In summer, dirty water and plankton blooms are other conditions to seek out. Silt particles or microscopic plant and animal life can cloud the water to almost shut out light penetration. Okay, so he's getting into this algae bloom part of it right here now. If a river or current flows through your fishing lake, this is always a prime location to do some daytime midsummer prospecting for bass. Such currents usually carry stained water, and even if not, the current itself breaks up the water and creates a barrier which helps block out some sunlight. 2, in warm water, a current is as refreshing to fish as a gentle breeze to anglers on a sweltering day. Okay, next is shallow water tactics. Since shallow water cover is easier to locate than many deep and visible hotspots, and shallow water fish are frequently active fish, begin by probing shallow sections if suitable cover is available. Rule of thumb, the brighter the day, the thicker the cover needed. Absolutely, absolutely, and it doesn't have to be summer we're talking about. Just think about it. You go to Lake Okeechobee on a crispy, cool, bright sunny day after a weather front has passed through maybe the day or two before. Guess what? Those bass are going to be under the thickest hyacinth or floating hydrilla they can find. Heavy shade. It's not just a summer thing. Okay, rule of thumb, the brighter the day, the thicker the cover needed. If you have an option, always select an area where the wind blowing into or through the vegetation or cover. Seldom consider any cover too thick at this season. Even if the cover is so thick you cannot see the water or get a lure into it, bass will occupy such areas if they can get under it. So back in 1981, they didn't do punching. At least not. It was not nearly as widely known as it is now. I mean, I certainly never knew about 1981. And so, of course, punching is what we do now. And that is, you get a 1 to 2 ounce tungsten weight on a Texas rig and a compact soft plastic bait. And that presentation, that weight will puncture right through one of them floating mats and get into that heavy shade right below. Great method. Whether they were doing it in 1981, very few. Certainly it wasn't publicized. Okay, one method to check out such heavy vegetation for the possible presence of bass is to drift or poke your way into an area and observe the stems of underwater weeds. If they are covered with an abundance of scum or algae, do not waste too much time in the spot. If they're clean, it usually indicates an abundance of baitfish eat this algae from the weeds. Then your chance of locating bass are good. Surface scum and algae is a different situation. Bass love to hide beneath it, especially when it is matted together solid like a carpet or putting green on a golf course. Yes, sirree, the old algae mat. Get out the floating frog or the punching rig. And always be aware of fish movement in the weeds. Sometimes noticeable only by a shaking lily pad or reed. With more than one type of weed growing in an area, look for sections where the different varieties meet, such as where lily pads and reeds emerge. Here, there's usually a change in the bottom composition. Any other type of cover or structure located in the weeds, whether visible above the surface or not, makes an area even better. Ditches, stumps, duck blinds, submerged brush, and bushes are a few examples of potential hotspots. Yes, that is true. One pattern I've seen in certain lakes is you get into a big, vast area of aquatic vegetation, and there'll be just the odd floating log or deadhead, and boy, those can be magnets sometimes. That wood in a weed bed can be a magnet sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all, but sometimes if you're fishing like a big rice bed, for example, and you see a deadhead sticking out somewhere, get a jig, or if they're hitting top waters, get that frog over there and hold on tight, my friend. All right. Now see, whenever I go off on a tangent, I lose my spot. So where are we? Too numerous. Nope. Ditches, stump. Okay. If the wind is blowing, such as through weeds extending above the surface, always fish into the wind. With the breeze in your face, the weeds are bent towards you. This enables your lure, or your line and lure, to slide over and through the vegetation. Avoid casting across or against the grain. And I just mentioned wild rice a minute ago, and in July, a lot of the wild rice in our Minnesota lakes, it's like fine, it's like long strands of grass almost. I mean, like long grass, or crabgrass. It's like long strands that they float on the surface. By September, that stuff like stiffens out and is like straight up. But in like July, it forms like a dense cover. And yes, a lot of times you don't want to fish, especially if you're trying to drop a jig in there or a Texas rig, you don't want to fish against the grain. A lot of times you do want to fish with the grain. Or if you're fishing, let's say you're fishing a top water around these edges and stuff, like a frog or something, a lot of times with the grain is the best option. Gotta agree. This guy's got some experience. Never heard of the author, James A. Brang, but he's got some experience behind him. No doubt about that. Due to numerous and ever-changing weather patterns, barometric pressure, and moods of the bass, I always attempt to establish a pattern within the weeds. Just because bass are in the vegetation does not mean they're everywhere in the thick stuff. At different times, the bass may be near tiny openings in the back in the weeds, under the thickest cabbage available, in the thin grass along the inside or outside edges, along the points of the weed beds, or elsewhere. In fishing over the thick surface cover, a slow, steady retrieve is easier for bass to track or follow. Where it is impossible for fish to actually see the lure riding above the surface over weeds, bass can actually follow the movement of the line and lure causes in the weeds. Then, when the bait enters a small opening, bass frequently explode after it. Old timers call it openings a bass's picture window. I like it. I've never heard of that. The picture window. In areas containing heavy floating scum and algae, large bass will keep such spots open by periodic tail fanning. Cast 10 or 15 feet beyond the opening and directly over the middle. Okay, time out again. I have never seen a bass purposely fanning his tail to keep an opening in the weeds above him there. A bedding bass will fan a bed in the bottom, which in his fanning will uproot the vegetation, creating a hole above him. So perhaps that's what he's getting at. But he's talking midsummer, which is past the spawn. I mean, I mean, not in every case, but I think we're talking past the spawn with this article. Don't you think that's what we're doing? So I don't know what he's getting at. Bass don't fan holes intentionally above them in the weeds. Okay, retrieve the lure so it swims or crawls through the opening and you're almost assured of an arm-jerking, heart-stopping strike. When crawling a lure over a vegetation-cluttered surface, explosive strikes often scatter weeds, water, and bass in different directions without you even hooking the fish. Other times, short strikers hit behind the lure. Bass may miss the lure because of poor visibility in the thick gunk. In many instances, they depend on sound, vibrations, and movement more than sight. Yes, it can be very frustrating trying to draw a strike on a frog in that thick stuff. They will short strike it. Try to keep your cool when a lunker tears the cover apart and still misses the lure. Continued casting and slightly slow retrieves, where possible, usually produces one or more additional strikes in the same spot. But even if you cannot raise the bass immediately, chances are you will do so later. Allow the area to rest, then return and try again. If your efforts still do not persuade the bass to attack, mark the exact same spot and return the next day or later. Once a large bass has taken up residence in an area containing abundant and suitable cover, the fish is not likely to move or surrender it to another smaller bass. See, now it totally sounds like he's talking about bedded bass and weed beds. Totally. Because the reason why I say that is, yes, you can come back later and catch a bass right on a little point, but he's really droning in on this and running it into the ground now, which to me it sounds like bedded bass. Deep water techniques. Here we go. Bold print, new paragraph. If your waters do not contain dense, shallow water cover, but feature sunken islands, deep, winding creeks, or river channels, submerged forests, and the like, you're still in luck. There is definitely no need to sit it beside the air conditioner. The trick is to change fishing locations and position lures in areas shaded from the sun. In the morning, most bass are behind the Most bass are behind the east creek banks or on the west side of vertical structures. Wait a minute now. In the morning, most bass are, that means the sun's in the east, are behind the east creek banks or on the west side of vertical. Oh, okay. So what he's saying is, if the sun is over here in the morning, okay, let's say it's over. Let's say this is east, and you got a drop off like this. He's saying the shade's going to be. Here's the drop off. He's saying the shade's going to be over here, and this is where the fish are going to set up. I've often wondered about that. Now I know like shallow shaded shorelines is really good in the summer. Let's say you're on Lake Ouachita, for example, in Arkansas, and you're on some kind of brim bed bite. Yeah, a lot of times you chase the shaded shorelines, and but anyways, back to James A. Brang. Where was I? During afternoon hours, they reverse their positions. During midday hours, they may not be on the north side of the structure beneath dense brush, other underwater cover, or in water too deep for. God, why am I having a hard time following this guy? Let me read that sentence again. I'm sorry if I'm just illiterate here. During midday hours, they may not be on the north side of the structure beneath dense cover, other underwater cover, or in water too deep for bright light to penetrate. In standing timber, search around the bases of the largest trees. All right, that didn't really. Editor, we need some editing. I don't get what he's saying. So we're going to just move on. One summer hotspot I found was a stump-covered sunken island near the mouth of Mammoth Furnace Creek in Barkley Lake, Kentucky. Mammoth Furnace, I don't know where that is. I mean, I've been in Barkley a number of times. Not sure where Mammoth Furnace Creek is. But dudes, if there's a sunken island there with stumps on it, you better listen up close. The top of the hump was 10 feet below the surface, with the surrounding depths dropping into 35 feet of water. During some of the hottest, brightest weather, I've never failed to catch a bunch of Braden-sized bass. The pattern is as dependable as my pocket watch. At daybreak or dusk, the bass are on top of... Okay, last page. One more page. On top of the mound, in and around the stumps and roots. When the sun is shining, the bass always bunch up along the shady side. And the higher overhead old sole is positioned... What the hell? I'm not kidding. This guy's got some weird lingo going on. And the higher overhead old sole is positioned, the deeper the fish descend. Oh, he's talking about the sun. Okay, so in the higher overhead old S-O-L, old sow, which he's referring to the sun. So the higher and more overhead it is positioned, the deeper the fish descend. During the midday hours, the fish are usually on the deep north side in the submerged brush. I don't know. Old soul. Come on, man. I guess that's just Kentucky lingo there, I guess. Many creek channels in similar structure provide basically the same conditions for bass. Once you find such a deep water hotspot, it usually remains productive all summer. This is one season when there is seldom major fish movement for long distances, as during spring and fall. Fish are usually tightly congregated in these choice deep areas, and even when not actively feeding, will take a lure just to prevent other bass from getting it. Silt lines. Here we go, silt lines. In gin clear lakes or other waters having no shade producing cover or structure, fish will descend into deeper water. How deep depends largely on the weather conditions and the depth of the clear water. A water thermometer or light meter will pinpoint the thermocline and silt line, which are usually located in close proximity. Okay, we now have awesome electronics, such as the Lowrances that I use, that will help pinpoint this thermocline area. And a lot of times what you'll see is, all the suspended fish will be like in one little zone. And that's the thermocline zone. Anyways, I'm not sure what he's talking about the silt line, though. Even in ultra clear lakes, there will be a silt line, but it may form in extremely deep water and frequently as deep as 40 feet or more beneath the surface. To bassers unfamiliar with this deep water hotspot, the silt line is merely the place where the clear upper layer of water meets a cloudy or dirty band of deeper water. On bright days, the fish are just beneath the mixing line where it interacts with permanent structure on the lake floor. Man, I'm getting a frog in I'm getting a hoarse voice from all this reading. By locating areas of hard, clean bottom or whatever structure is available with the intersecting thermocline and silt line, you can quickly pinpoint the best spots in the lake. Bass use the silt line the same as they do a weed line, tree line, or shoreline. Even if the silt line is deep in 25 or more feet and far from shore, the fish move along the edge where it meets the bottom until they locate suitable permanent features, such as stumps, rocks, gravel, clay, or whatever other breaks are present. If you do not have a water temperature gauge or light meter, but the lake contains some type of deep growing moss or weeds, you can use this vegetation as an indicator to where to begin. Weeds will grow as deep as the sunlight penetration. Yes, that is correct. Begin fishing at the deepest edge of the weeds and gradually work deeper. Okay. All right, let's just show you a picture of James. Author James Brang shows a hefty bass caught from weeds thick enough to bail, he says. Lure moving on top of the cover attracted the stray. Okay, James has got a good one right there. There he is. Certified good one. That is a good one. All right, weather fronts. Okay, I thought we covered that, but he's got a whole section now of it. The weather patterns affect fish behavior throughout the year, but especially during hot midsummer months. Okay, I'll just go with all year. Okay, summer is not that any different. I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, to me, it's spring weather fronts are probably the most volatile, really, more than summer. But in James' experience, he's going with summer. Always pay close attention to weather reports and approaching frontal systems through television forecasts and newspaper weather maps. Okay, we don't have to do that anymore. Try to determine when the front will be approaching your area and arrange to be on the lake at that time if at all possible. Hey, when you put the boat in at sunrise and fish till sunset, you will find that weather front sometime during the day. When the barometer takes a sudden nosedive and wind and black clouds begin rolling in, bass often go into a feeding frenzy, the likes of which bass anglers often dream about. Some systems zip through rapidly, and in a couple of hours, everything is over and back to normal. If bassers are not on the water at the right time in a productive location, you will likely miss the action. Avoid long, time-consuming boat runs, which could eat up the prime fishing time. There he said. There it is. You want to hit the window. Don't be running, be fishing. All right. Some of the slower moving systems have enormous bands of heavy clouds which may hover in an area. These are the weather systems I wait for. When one approaches, you will find me on the lake from daylight until dark. James, you and I think alike, my friend. I have taken days off from work to fish local waters when such conditions existed, and by doing so have enjoyed some of the best fishing action of my life, even better than those long vacation trips to famous bass factories in different parts of the country. On 2 trips to Lake Monroe here in Indiana, oh boy, Lake Monroe. When fishing slow-moving summer weather fronts, which came through exactly 1 week apart, I caught limits of bass that averaged over 6 pounds per fish. To this day, one boat dock proprietor asked me how I could always hit a perfect day when the fish were biting. When fishing summer weather fronts, be extra cautious of wind and lightning. They can kill you. The most difficult thing for a basser to do is to leave a bunch of feeding fish, but for safety's sake, it is absolutely necessary, especially when your hotspot is located in open water. That's right. I mean, I don't know about you guys, lightning freaks me out, man. Freaks me out. So if I got lightning, I am on shore. This is one reason I attempt to locate several areas containing fish close to shore or in protected coves with high banks. Since most summer storms in my area approach from the west, the western shore is the logical area to search for such hotspots. Under storm front conditions, the fish will usually be near the same structure and in the same vicinity as on bright days. The difference is they may be somewhat shallower and scattered over a wider area rather than bunched up in a small shaded area. For instance, they may be all over and around a sunken island and on both sides of a winding creek channel, the same as at daybreak and dusk on a clear, hot day. Just because there is existing overcast storm conditions doesn't mean bass will move several miles up the lake or back into large coves to get to a certain shoreline or stump bed. If bass are already taking up summer residence near such areas, they may definitely be good at such times. Always attempt to locate the home of summer bass, whether shallow or deep. Once a front passes and the skies become partly sunny, the action usually dwindles. Yes, it does. When the sun pops out and disappears only to shine again in a few minutes, are even poorer fishing conditions than the bright cloudless weather. That doesn't make sense. So yeah, and I overall I agree. Man, when you get that heavy overcast, shallow bite going, you can see you get that frog, you'll see fish coming from 15, 20 feet across the surface to hit your lure. It's really cool. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys, a lot of you people have seen that. And then when that front passes, I mean, the fish bite way less. And they definitely don't come from 15, 20 feet away to hit the lure. All right. When fishing during hot summer days or on cooler nights, or at any other time for that matter, always try to be a thinking basser. Use logic and common sense in figuring out what areas are shaded and where the bass will be. By eliminating one unproductive area after another, you will soon locate some fish. And before long, you'll no longer dread the so-called summer fishing doldrums. As a professional guide once said, fish are just like people, only wetter. Actually, fellow bassers, you have a choice for summer fishing. If you are one of the breed that enjoys night fishing, continue to do your thing under the moon and stars. But if you're one who doesn't favor night fishing and all that goes with it, mosquitoes, bats, inability to navigate in the dark, snag lures, loss of sleep, absence of scenery, etc., work the shaded water during the daylight hours. You can enjoy fantastic bass fishing all summer long without ever missing a wink's sleep. And there you have it from James A. Brang. Midsummer fishing tips. And River Cruiser. So there you have it. I'm really got nothing more to add to that. So this reading is over, and I hope you are well off into La La Land, sawing some Z's. Over.